Artyutan, the great chamber of the Galactic Concord floated in the silent dark, high above the blue-green swirl of Viridia Prime. Inside, beings of 100 shapes and sizes sat in tiered circles, their voices low and calm, their thoughts measured by centuries of peace and order. To them, the galaxy was a well-tuned machine, and every species had its place. Some ruled, some served, some watched, and then there were the humans. Humans had only been known to the Concord for 73 standard cycles. In that time, they had done little but argue among themselves, fight over scraps of rock, and send clumsy signals into the void. They built noisy ships, burned their own atmosphere, and seemed unable to agree on even the simplest things. The Concord had long decided they were not worth serious attention, just another young species that would either destroy itself or fade into obscurity. But now, something had changed. Ambassador Krell of the Vorthan hegemony stood at the center of the chamber, his tall armored form casting a long shadow across the polished floor. His voice, deep and resonant, echoed through the hall as he activated a holographic display. Images flickered to life, human freighters moving through neutral zones, orbital platforms bristling with weapons near uninhabited systems, and encrypted signals bouncing between hidden outposts. "These are not the actions of a peaceful species," Krell said, his mandibles clicking with quiet fury. "Earth has expanded beyond its agreed boundaries. They have fortified positions in the Helios Drift, the Cygnus Vale, and even near the old Zenthari ruins. They do not ask. They do not negotiate. They simply take." A murmur rippled through the chamber. The Lumen delegates, their gelatinous forms shimmering with concern, exchanged silent pulses of light. The Qatari, small and many-limbed, shifted nervously in their seats. Even the usually unshakable Vorlax elders leaned forward, their eye stalks twitching. "This cannot stand," said Elder Mavora, her voice like dry leaves. "If we allow this unchecked growth, other young species will follow. Chaos will spread," Krell nodded. "The hegemony proposes an immediate response. Earth must dismantle all military installations beyond the Sol system within 30 cycles. They must submit to Concord oversight of their shipbuilding, resource extraction, and interstellar travel. If they refuse, we will enforce quarantine permanently." There was silence, not the silence of doubt but of agreement. No one spoke in defense of humanity. No one thought they would fight back. After all, what could a single planet of squabbling mammals do against the combined might of the Concord? Far away, on a small rocky world circling an average yellow star, the message arrived not with fanfare but with a quiet beep in a secure bunker deep beneath the mountains of Colorado. President Daniel Hayes stood in the dim light, his face lined with the weight of sleepless nights. Beside him, General Lisa Monroe studied the translated ultimatum on a flat screen, her arms crossed, her jaw tight. "They think we'll roll over," she said finally. Hayes didn't answer right away. He walked to the window, a thick slab of reinforced glass showing nothing but rock wall, and sighed. "They don't understand us. They never have." For decades, Earth had played the part of the confused newcomer. They'd accepted minor trade deals, sent polite diplomats, and pretended not to notice the condescension in every alien glance. But behind closed doors, humanity had been watching, learning, and preparing. When the first alien probe crashed in the Siberian tundra 50 years ago, scientists didn't just study it. They copied it, improved it, and hid what they built. Project Aegis had begun in secret. Not as a weapon of war, but as a shield. A promise. If the galaxy ever turned on them, Earth would not go quietly. Now that moment had come. 30 cycles, Monroe said, glancing at the countdown clock already ticking in the corner. "That's less than a month in Earth time." "We won't meet their demands," Hayes said, turning back to her. His eyes were tired but clear. "We won't give up our future because they're afraid of what we might become." Monroe nodded. She tapped a code into her wristpad. Across the planet, in hidden hangars, buried shipyards, and silent orbital docks, lights flickered on. Machines hummed to life. Pilots were called from leave. Engineers double-checked systems they'd spent years perfecting in shadow. The order went out. Activate Aegis. In orbit above Mars, a cluster of seemingly abandoned mining stations unfolded like steel flowers, revealing weapon mounts and sensor arrays. On the dark side of Europa, ice melted away to expose launch silos filled with drone swarms. Deep in the asteroid belt, a network of kinetic rods, nicknamed rods from God by the engineers who built them, aligned with terrifying precision. None of this was visible to the Concorde. To their scanners, Earth still looked weak, disorganized, harmless. But that was the point. Hayes walked back to the command table and placed his hand on the red comm button. "Send the reply," he said. Monroe hesitated for only a second. Then she pressed transmit. The message was short. "No threats, no pleas. Just 3 words in plain English broadcast on every open channel. We stand ready." Back on Viridia Prime, the Concorde received the message with confusion. Some thought it was a translation error. Others laughed. Ambassador Krell merely frowned, his claws tapping against his thigh. "They don't understand what they're facing," he muttered. But on Earth, in bunkers and barracks, in homes and hospitals, people looked up at the night sky and felt something they hadn't in a long time. Hope mixed with steel. The Concorde expected surrender. What they got was resolve. And somewhere, in the cold void between stars, the first human warships powered up their drives, silent and unseen, waiting for the moment to prove that even the smallest spark can light a fire big enough to burn through the dark. Part 2. The Concorde fleet moved like a storm across the solar system. Hundreds of ships, sleek and silver, glided past Jupiter's moons without slowing. Their orders were clear: secure Mars, disable Earth's orbital defenses, and prepare for occupation. They expected little resistance. After all, human ships were slow, noisy, and easy to track. Their weapons were crude, their tactics predictable. Admiral Zorvak stood on the command deck of his flagship, the Iron Maw, watching the red planet grow larger on the view screen. He had led 100 campaigns, crushed rebellions on a dozen worlds, and never once lost a battle. To him, this was not war. It was cleanup. "Begin landing sequence," he ordered, his voice calm. "Deploy pacification drones. Minimal force." Below, on the surface of Mars, the old human colony of New Ares lay quiet. Its domes were dark, its comms silent. The Concorde assumed the humans had fled or surrendered. They were wrong. Hidden beneath the rust-colored dunes, deep inside lava tubes and abandoned mines, human soldiers waited. Their suits were matte black, their weapons modified with scavenged alien tech. Among them was Captain Owen Briggs, a lean man with sharp eyes and a quiet voice. He had trained for this moment for 10 years. Not to win glory, but to survive. "Hold position," he whispered into his helmet comm. "Let them get comfortable." Above, Vorthon dropships descended like metal seeds, landing in neat rows near the colony's main airlock. Troops marched out, scanning for threats. Finding none, they began setting up control hubs. That was the signal. From a ridge 2 kilometers away, a human drone, no bigger than a bird, launched a micropulse. It struck a power node on the nearest dropship. Sparks flew. Alarms blared. Before the Vorthon soldiers could react, the ground erupted. Dozens of hidden turrets rose from the sand, firing focused plasma bursts. More drones, hundreds of them, swarmed from tunnels, their wings humming like angry bees. They didn't carry bombs. They carried data. They mapped shield frequencies, relayed weak points, and jammed enemy comms. On the Iron Maw, Admiral Zorvak frowned. "What is this?" "Sir, we're under attack," a technician stammered. "From the surface and—" "From orbit," Zorvak turned sharply. On the main screen, blips appeared near Phobos. Small, fast, unidentified. "They're using stealth tech," another officer said, voice tight with disbelief. "But that's impossible. Only the Concorde has phase cloaking." Not anymore. For years, human scientists had studied debris from a crashed Qatari scout ship. They couldn't replicate the full system, but they found a workaround. Adaptive metamaterials that bent light and sensors just enough to hide in plain sight. The ships weren't truly invisible, just hard to see until it was too late. Among those ships was the Aurora, a destroyer barely half the size of a Vorthon cruiser. At its helm, Captain Briggs, now in orbit, gripped the controls. He wasn't a pilot by training, but after the Mars garrison fell in the first wave, he'd volunteered for space duty. "Target the Iron Maw's aft shield generator," he said. "Fire when ready." The Aurora banked hard, weaving through debris. Concorde ships fired blindly, their targeting systems confused by the swarm of decoy drones. One blast grazed the Aurora's hull, but the ship held. Then from the asteroid belt, something else came. Long, thin rods of tungsten, launched days earlier from hidden platforms, slammed into the Concorde's rear supply line at near light speed. There was no explosion, just a flash of heat as metal vaporized on impact. 3 support cruisers vanished in an instant. Zorvac stared at the wreckage. How did they know our route? They knew because humans had been listening. For years, they'd intercepted low-priority Concorde traffic, piecing together patrol patterns, fuel schedules, even officer rotations. They knew Zorvac always kept his reserves near Deimos. They knew his ships recharged shields every 47 minutes. They knew everything. Back on Mars, the battle turned. Human soldiers armed with rail rifles and smart grenades pushed the Vorton troops back into their dropships. The aliens, trained for open warfare, struggled in the tight corridors of the colony. They couldn't tell friend from foe in the smoke and static. One Vorton soldier, young and wide-eyed, raised his hands. A human medic, Private Lena Ruiz, hesitated, then tossed him a binding cuff instead of a bullet. "You're not the enemy," she said. "Your leaders are." In orbit, Briggs gave the final order. "Launch the resonant pulse." The Aurora released a single device, a sphere no bigger than a basketball. It drifted toward the Iron Maw unnoticed. Then it pulsed, not with energy but with sound, a frequency tuned to the exact resonance of Vorthon's shield harmonics. The shields flickered, then collapsed. For 3 seconds, the Iron Maw was naked. 3 seconds was all Briggs needed. He fired every weapon the Aurora had: missiles, lasers, even old-fashioned kinetic shells. They tore through the flagship's hull like paper. Alarms screamed. Lights died. Admiral Zorvac, thrown against a bulkhead, watched his command deck flood with smoke. "Retreat," he choked out. "All ships, retreat." The Concorde fleet broke formation, scattering like startled birds. Some ships jumped to warp. Others limped away, trailing plasma. The humans didn't chase them. They held their ground. On Earth, cheers erupted in command centers. But President Hayes didn't smile. He knew this was only the beginning. In the ruins of New Ares, Briggs floated in his cockpit, staring at the drifting wreckage of the Iron Maw. He felt no joy, only relief that they'd bought more time. Back on Viridia Prime, the news spread like fire. The humans had not just resisted. They had struck first. They had won. And for the first time, the members of the Galactic Concorde felt something they had not felt in centuries. Fear, not of human weapons, but of human will. Part 3, Victory on Mars, came at a cost. Earth's orbital network was shattered. The moon's shipyards lay in ruins, twisted metal floating in silent clouds. Cities that once glowed with light now ran on emergency power. Their streets quiet except for the hum of generators and the murmur of worried voices. Yet something unexpected grew in the ashes. Not despair, but unity. For the first time in generations, nations stopped arguing. The old borders meant little now. Food, fuel, and medicine moved freely across continents. Engineers from Brazil worked side by side with programmers from Vietnam. Doctors in Cairo shared vaccine formulas with labs in Oslo. The enemy was no longer each other. It was out there, among the stars, and Earth had to stand as one. Deep in Geneva, inside a repurposed subway station turned command hub, Dr. Maya Patel sat hunched over a flickering console. Her dark hair was tied back, her eyes tired but sharp. She had spent her life studying alien languages, not for war but for peace. Now her skills were more valuable than ever. She had been analyzing captured Concorde data since the battle. Most of it was tactical: ship logs, shield frequencies, troop movements. But buried in the noise were personal messages. Complaints from Qatari laborers about unfair rations. Quiet doubts from Lumen officers about the morality of the blockade. Even a Vorthon junior officer wondering aloud if humans were truly as savage as they'd been told. Maya leaned forward. "They're not united," she whispered. She brought her findings to President Hayes and General Monroe. "The Concorde isn't one mind," she explained. "It's a collection of species held together by fear and force. The Vorthon dominate the others. If we can show them that humanity isn't a threat but an example, they might turn." Monroe crossed her arms. "You want to send a message? After they tried to occupy us?" "Yes," Maya said. "But not a threat. A truth?" Hayes listened quietly. Then he nodded. "Do it." What followed was not a military operation, but a broadcast. Using salvaged Concorde comms arrays and boosted signals from Jupiter's magnetic field, Earth sent out a single transmission, not in coded pulses or encrypted bursts, but in clear, simple language, repeated in every known alien dialect. The video showed no weapons, no soldiers, no warships. It showed a school in Nairobi where children rebuilt desks from scrap wood. It showed farmers in Iowa planting seeds under solar lamps, their faces lit by hope. It showed a nurse in Manila holding the hand of an old man as he recovered from surgery, and it showed engineers in a bunker beneath Denver, laughing as they fixed a broken drone with duct tape and spare parts. At the end, a young girl, no older than 8, looked straight into the camera. "We just want to live," she said. "Like you." The message spread faster than anyone expected. On Viridia Prime, it played in secret. Qatari workers watched it during breaks, their many eyes wide. Lumen elders pulsed with slow, thoughtful light. Even among the Vorthon, some officers muted their screens and watched in private, their rigid beliefs shaken. One Vorthon scientist, named Trell, wrote in his journal, "They fight not to conquer, but to protect." What kind of species does that? Back on Earth, the people didn't know if their message would work. They kept working, kept rebuilding, kept watching the skies. Chloe Bennett, a 24-year-old engineer from Oregon, stood on the roof of a ruined apartment building in Chicago, adjusting a solar array. She had helped design the stealth drones that crippled the Iron Maw. Now she was fixing power grids. Her hands were calloused, her clothes stained with grease, but she smiled as the array clicked into place and lights flickered on in the building below. A child's laugh floated up from the street. That was worth fighting for. Meanwhile, in orbit, Captain Owen Briggs led repair crews on the Aurora. The ship had taken heavy damage, but they patched it with spare hull plates and sheer stubbornness. He received a message from Earth, not orders, but a simple thank you from a school in Toronto. The kids had drawn pictures of the Aurora as a space dragon that protected them. He taped one to his console. On Mars, Private Lena Ruiz helped former Vorthon prisoners build a temporary shelter. They didn't speak the same language, but they shared water, tools, and silence. One alien, a young male named Jick, pointed to a photo on Ruiz's wristpad, her family in San Diego. He touched his own chest, then hers, and made a small sound that might have been, "Same." Ruiz nodded. "Yeah, same." The galaxy watched. And for the first time, some began to wonder if the Conquered had been wrong about humanity all along. Not because humans were strong, though they had proven that, but because they were kind. Even in the middle of war. In the halls of Viridia Prime, whispers grew louder. The Qatari delegation requested a closed-door meeting. The Lumen stopped voting with the Vorthon. Even the Vorlax elders asked difficult questions about the ethics of quarantine. Ambassador Krell tried to silence the dissent. "This is human trickery," he told the council. "Emotional manipulation. Do not be fooled." But doubt had taken root, and doubt once planted is hard to kill. On Earth, Maya Patel received a faint signal late one night. It was encrypted, but not by Conquered standards. It came from the Lumen homeworld. Just 3 words in broken English: "We see you." She didn't tell anyone, not yet. But she smiled as she saved the message. Hope, she thought, doesn't need to be loud. Sometimes it just needs to be seen. Part 4. The cracks in the Conquered grew wider. 3 small species, the Qatari, the Lumen, and the gentle plant-like Mirth, publicly withdrew their support for the blockade. They did not declare war on the Vorthon, but they stopped sending ships, stopped sharing data, and closed their ports to Conquered patrols. On Viridia Prime, Ambassador Krell raged in private, but his voice no longer carried the weight it once did. On Earth, the news was met not with celebration, but with quiet resolve. They knew the real fight was not over. The Vorthon still held the largest fleet. They still controlled key jump gates and supply lines. And they were angry. General Lisa Monroe gathered her top officers in the Cheyenne Mountain bunker. Maps of the galaxy glowed on the walls marked with red zones and safe paths. "They'll come back harder," she said. "We need to hit them where it hurts, not just their ships, but their confidence." The plan was called Operation Iron Bloom. It wasn't about holding ground. It was about speed, surprise, and striking deep into Conquered territory. Human forces would hit relay stations, fuel depots, and communication hubs across 3 systems, all at once. The goal was not to destroy everything, but to show the galaxy that Earth could reach anywhere, anytime. Lieutenant Jake Morrison stood in the hangar of the Aurora, checking the seals on his flight suit. He was young, with messy brown hair and a habit of humming old rock songs under his breath. He had never flown a real combat mission before, but he knew the new fighter like his own heartbeat. It was small, fast, and carried a weapon no one had seen before: resonant plasma warheads designed by Chloe Bennett and her team. These warheads didn't explode like bombs. Instead, they released a pulse that vibrated at the exact frequency of Vorthon alloy. One hit could turn a solid hull plate into dust. "Remember," Captain Briggs told him over the comm, "you're not alone. Drones will cover you. Ground teams are already in place near Proxima Centauri. Just get in, fire the shot, and get out." Jake nodded. "Copy that." The launch was silent. The Aurora and a dozen other human ships slipped out of the asteroid belt under cloak, their engines running cold. They traveled not in a straight line, but in a scattered pattern, mimicking asteroid debris. To Concord scanners, they were just more space junk. At the edge of the Proxima system, they split up. Jake's fighter peeled off toward Relay Station Theta 7, a key node that linked Vorthon command posts across the sector. The station hung in orbit around a dead moon, guarded by 2 patrol frigates. He waited until the frigates turned away on their routine sweep. Then he dropped his cloak and fired. The first warhead struck the station's main antenna array. Metal crumbled like dry leaves. Alarms blared, but before the Vorthon could react, Jake fired a second shot at the power core. The station didn't explode. It simply fell apart piece by piece, drifting into silence. He turned hard and vanished back into the dark. At the same time, other human teams struck. In the Cygnus Vale, drones overloaded a fuel depot, turning it into a harmless cloud of vapor. Near the Xanthari ruins, a team of Martian Marines disabled a jump gate controller, stranding a Vorthon squadron light years from home. The attacks lasted less than 20 minutes. But the damage was done. Back on Viridia Prime, panic spread. How had humans known about Theta 7? How had they bypassed early warning systems? Most of all, how had they coordinated so perfectly across such distances? The answer was simple. They had help. The Qatari, tired of being treated as slaves, had slipped data chips into Concord's supply crates. The Lumen, masters of quantum signals, had opened hidden channels for human comms. Even the Mirth, with their deep-rooted connection to cosmic energy fields, had sent warnings through subtle shifts in stellar radiation. Warnings only human scientists, trained to look for patterns, could understand. The Vorthon accused the traitors of sabotage, but proof was hard to find, and trust, once broken, could not be easily repaired. On Earth, people watched the news with quiet pride. There were no parades, no speeches, just more work to do. In Nairobi, children used pieces of fallen satellite debris to build wind chimes that sang in the breeze. In Oslo, engineers powered a hospital with a reactor made from salvaged Concorde battery cells. In Chicago, Chloe Bennett tested a new drone design that could repair itself using asteroid dust. They were not warriors by nature, but they had learned to fight for what mattered. Admiral Zorvac, recovering from his wounds aboard a medical frigate, received a private message from a high-ranking Vorlax elder. It contained no orders, only a question. Is this war worth the cost? He had no answer. Meanwhile, Jake Morrison returned to the Aurora, his hands shaking slightly. Not from fear, but from adrenaline. Captain Briggs clapped him on the shoulder. "Good job, kid," Jake grinned. "Told you I'd make it back." That night, as the human fleet regrouped near Saturn's rings, they received another signal. This one came from the Qatari homeworld. It was a star chart, marked with safe routes and hidden bases. A gift. Earth was no longer alone. The Conquered had thought humanity was weak because they cared too much. But that was their mistake. Caring gave humans something the Conquered had forgotten. A reason to fight that went beyond power or pride. And in the cold silence of space, that reason burned brighter than any weapon. Part 5. The call for peace came not with a bang, but with a quiet message sent on an open channel. The Galactic Concord, shaken and divided, asked Earth to send representatives to Viridia Prime for talks. No weapons, no warships, just words. President Daniel Hayes did not send generals or diplomats. He chose people the galaxy had never seen before. A teacher from Nairobi named Amina Okoye, who taught children under solar lamps after the blackouts. A farmer from Iowa named Carl Jenkins, whose fields had fed 3 towns during the crisis. A nurse from Manila named Rosa Delgado, who had worked 70-hour weeks in a field hospital with no painkillers, and Chloe Bennett, the young engineer who had helped build the drones that changed everything. They traveled on a single, unarmed shuttle painted white with Earth's flag, a simple blue circle on a field of green on its side. No escort, no tricks, just 4 humans and their hope. When they arrived at Viridia Prime, the great chamber was full. Every species in the Concord watched in silence as the humans walked in. They wore plain clothes, not uniforms. They carried no data pads, no weapons, no demands. Only small satchels. Ambassador Krell stood at the center, his posture stiff. "You come without protection," he said, his voice echoing. "Foolish." Chloe stepped forward. She was nervous, but her voice was steady. "We don't need protection here, because we're not here to fight." She opened her satchel and placed a data slate on the floor. It showed images, not of war but of life. A child planting a tree in Denver. A group of elders sharing stories in Mumbai. A classroom in Oslo where students learned alien languages. Then, footage of the ruined lunar shipyards, now being rebuilt by human and former Vorthan prisoners working side by side. "This is who we are," Chloe said. "We don't want your empire. We just want our place in the stars." A murmur moved through the chamber. The lumen pulsed with soft blue light. The Qatari clicked their claws in quiet approval. Even some Vorthan officers looked away, ashamed. Amina Okoye spoke next. "My students asked me why the stars stopped shining during the blockade. I told them it was because fear had covered the sky. But now we bring light back, not with weapons but with hands that build, not break." Carl Jenkins added, "We grow food from dirt. We fix what's broken. We share what we have. That's not weakness. That's how life survives." Rosa Delgado's voice was gentle but firm. "I've held the hands of dying soldiers from both sides. They all asked the same thing, was it worth it? Let's make sure the answer is yes." The silence that followed was deep, not empty but full, of thought, of shame, of change. Elder Mavora of the Vorlax rose slowly. "For centuries we believed order meant control. But you have shown us that true strength lies in choice, in care, in courage that does not seek to dominate but to endure." She turned to the council. "The conquered must change, or it will fall." One by one the species agreed. The blockade was lifted. Earth was granted full sovereignty over its systems. Human scientists would be allowed to join galactic research councils. Trade would open, not as charity but as partnership. Most importantly, Earth was offered observer status in the Conquered, with a path to full membership if they chose. But the greatest gift came from the Qatari and Lumen. They proposed a mutual defense pact, not because they feared Earth, but because they respected it. As the humans prepared to leave, Ambassador Krell approached Chloe. He did not bow, but he met her eyes. "You surprised us," he said. "We thought you were chaos, but you are something else." "What?" she asked. "Hope," he said, and walked away. Back on Earth, there were no grand celebrations. People simply went back to work, but with lighter hearts. In Nairobi, Amina's students planted a garden shaped like the Viridia Prime Station. In Iowa, Carl shared seeds with a Qatari botanist via video link. In Manila, Rosa trained alien medics in field triage. Chloe returned to her workshop beneath Chicago. On her desk sat a small gift from the Lumen, a crystal that glowed softly in the dark, pulsing like a heartbeat. She placed it next to the child's drawing of the aurora that Captain Briggs had given her. Above, the stars shone brighter than ever. Not because the darkness had vanished, but because humanity had proven that even the smallest light can push it back. The galaxy had come to Earth expecting a threat. They found a neighbor. And in the quiet hum of a rebuilt world, humans looked up not with fear, but with quiet pride, knowing they had earned their place among the stars not by force but by heart.